How are you? Welcome to the critical moves of Telesur. Today we will speak of Venezuela and the recent incidents that happened in the context of the elections of the new election for the Assembly. What is upcoming for 2020? Let's see this today. Let's begin. Let's listen to declarations in the context of the elections of the new conjoint election of the Assembly. There is a new directive of the opposition in the Assembly that is led by Luis Parra of Primero Justicia. The country rejects Juan Guaidó as a puppet of the imperialism. It is a very corrupt person. He is leaving the Assembly being a very millionaire person. He stole the money that the North American government gave him. The North American government came and said that they don't recognize the results of the Assembly. But I tell Mike Pompeo and all of the authorities, what are you going to explain? You're going to have to explain why you lost the directive of the Assembly. What are you going to lie to him? Let them keep their own struggle. The people and the elections this year will recover the Assembly. I want to congratulate Juan Guaidó for his re-election as president of the Assembly and as a legitimate election with over 100 votes. I'm surprised how they all joined together, all the parties joined together, and the U.S. will continue to support Juan Guaidó. Look, we have made mistakes. We're all human beings. We're not the Messiah. Nor the less, we're just public servants. But we all want a second chance, and I'm asking for a second chance for Juan Guaidó. I'm asking for a second chance for this country, a second chance for Venezuela. The National Assembly that guarantees the space informs all parties that they stop any type of childish struggles, and that we will make the decisions that are necessary so we can recover peace. How about we do a mapping of everything that's going on? The Assembly now with a new directive. Elections of the Assembly. All of the falsehoods have come down. According to the Constitution of Venezuela, the election of the directive has been done, and they will be leading the Assembly for 2 years. We only have one camera and have 160 members. We have a general regulation, and we need half plus one so we can have quorum so we can elect the directive body. This is done with personal elections, and the simple majority is enough to have the votes. And this January, 151 of the 167 Congress members were elected. Therefore, the quorum was installed. According to the regulation, you only needed 76 members to elect the new directive. Since there was an absence of the president, Juan Guaidó, and according to the internal regulation, the session should have been installed, and that's what happened. Héctor Agüero was the director of the debate, and Luis Rodriguez She was the secretary. When no other candidacy was presented, there was a vote. The way that this happened was that there had 81% in favor. Luis Parra of Primera Justicia was elected president for the period 2020-2021, along with all of his people. The session was held according to what the law establishes. All of the leaving directive was present except for Guaidó. Now, what are the challenges for this new phase of Venezuela? After electing the new directive body, the road that must be followed in 2020 is clear but hard. This body must confront a lot of challenges, which is to overcome the opposition led by Juan Guaidó, and he does not accept his defeat. And he should accept that he no longer is the president of this body, and this body must elect the electoral tribunal. And if this is not possible, what happens is that the constitutional court of the electoral body will have to convey the new members of this electoral body. Let's not forget that there is an economic war against Venezuela, and Juan Guaidó did nothing while he was the leader of the parliament. What he must try to do is to find the legality of this parliament. Let's see the websites that have to do with this. Telesur says on January 9, says Venezuela claims that they have found documents where the U.S. is trying to interfere in the elections. Jorge Arriaza offered a press conference where he showed a diplomatic note sent by the U.S. to several countries, by which the document is called, they're asking for support for new elections in the assembly. And the text says that the United States recognizes its interest in being part of the transition government in Venezuela, and also wants to keep coercive unilateral measures to force the ousting of the President Nicolás Maduro. Arriaza also explained that the United States wants to attribute themselves the process of dialogue that have been as a product of the blockade. However, they recognize that Maduro has been the first one to call to the dialogue. Another website we've seen is Hispan TV. This is of January 8. United States threatens Maduro with additional actions that have never been applied. United States warned the president of Venezuela that if the opposer Juan Guaidó is arrested, they will take additional measures that have never been taken. Washington will increase pressures to force the ousting of Maduro if the security of Guaidó is in danger. Washington also says that they are following closely everything that happens in the National Assembly of Venezuela, where Juan Guaidó and a rival opponent have fought for the presidency. I want to suggest that you analyze the text called "United States puts its hand in to save Guaidó." This was written on today, January 10, in Mission Truth. You can find the whole text. It says, although for the internal policy of Venezuela, Guaidó has no standing. However, for the press and for the U.S. government and their allies, Guaidó is the man who is responsible for the two main branches of government, although this is totally apart from the Constitution. It is foreseen that Luis Parra goes into the list of the people that are being on the blacklist of the U.S. This apparently, this is the intention of also holding the false presidency of Guaidó by delegitimizing the current president. Everything seems to point at that in an electoral year, the bet for Donald Trump is to keep the Guaidó strategy, regardless of his catastrophic results in 2019. And there is going to be an increase of more sanctions on Venezuela to show their power and to show the Trump foreign policy as successful for the region. The agenda is clearly that of the force. We have a strategic question in our website. After installing through regulatory procedure the new directive of the Assembly, what will Guaidó say to the U.S. and what should the strategy be in this scenario? Please participate with us, interact with us. When we're back after this pause, I'm going to start with an expert in this context. She's not only a legal expert, constitutional expert. She is also an expert of internal and external policy. When we're back, we will tell you who it is. Let's make a timeline about the coup d'etat that has been prolonged between 2019 and what's still ongoing of 2020. Ever since the arrival of Hugo Chavez to the presidency, Venezuela has been a victim of a coup d'etat that's been ongoing and that has been even worse during the presidency of Maduro. There has been a group that is trying to push a coup and oust this president that has been legitimately elected in 2019. There was a Guaidó strategy with which the United States has tried to impose a puppet that is loyal to their interests and allowed to steal all of the enormous resources of Venezuela. This began on January of last year when Juan Guaidó, member of Voluntad Popular, who was elected for a year as president of the National Assembly, self-proclaimed himself as president of Venezuela. This vulnerates the constitution and the legislation of Venezuela and the people itself, who months before had elected President Maduro with 68% of the votes. Exactly a month after, in February, the United States and all of the other countries of their allies tried to violate the sovereignty with the excuse of giving some humanitarian help. They tried to penetrate Venezuela with humanitarian help. It was a clear terrorist act with this horse of Troy, and they tried to break the stability of the country. Several pictures showed that the pass of Guaidó to Colombia was held with Los Rastrojos, which is an irregular group. This is obvious. This makes it evident that there is a relationship with the paramilitary and drug trafficking of Colombia. Leopoldo López, some months later, tried to push a coup d'etat in the Carlota with a reduced number of of militaries, many were scared, and Lopez, what he did was he escaped from Venezuela. Leopoldo Lopez has a lot of claims of corruption against him, and now we don't know where he is. Juan Guaidó has lost the support of the opposition, and this has also caused difficulties with his supporters in Congress. And now Luis Parra has been elected as president of the National Assembly. Let's start with the analysis and our critical moves. We are here with Dr. Maria Alejandra Diaz in her double condition of constitutional lawyer and assembly, and a member of the Congress, member of the Assembly. She will help us to better understand what has happened during this first days of this 2020. Behind the camera, she said that there is a timeline that is also parallel to the one we have presented. Hi, thank you very much for having me. And let's try to understand a little of what's going on. Because what we're able to understand in this phase will determine all of the rest. And this beginning of the year has been very volatile. There's something we have to remember. How was the opposition able to occupy the legislative branch? It was through an election that is the same electoral tribunal that happened then, and now they don't recognize. So that means that they recognize it when they win, and they don't when they lose. So in 2015, the opposition had the majority, and this majority was to say to the president that he had to leave the presidency. What they were trying to do is trying to oust the president from the legislative branch, and that is not possible. I think we should also mention the context when this happened. This was a year where the economic war in Venezuela was even worse. There are two scenarios. The previous scenario where the results of where the opposition won the parliament, and of course there's also the context of what happens in Venezuela. A sector of the population was being attacked. And let's not forget that back then they were going through the grief of losing President Chavez. That was the leader of and the father of their movement. And in the midst of this, there was an attack on the presidency. What was the first thing that they disappeared? Hygiene products, soap, sanitary napkins, knowing that the Venezuelan ladies and women have basic needs. But of course, they also attacked the possibility that when they woke up and made the breakfast, they could not have the arepas, the milk and coffee, and the arepa is like the Venezuelan bread. And what did they do with the company people? What they did was to eliminate. They eliminated all these products, and of course the phenomenon of making long rows for basic products became so evident. Well, unfortunately, people did not understand this correctly because they felt like abandoned. People felt abandoned, and then, while they were orphans, then came the strategy of the opposition, and there is where the opposition wins the assembly. And what they declare first is that they're beyond the constitutional order, and they start to publish laws, they start to issue laws that are beyond their powers. And what they said that this law will not pass. There is a control of constitutionality of all of these acts.
Lo infalible que es la Constitución de la República Bolivariana de Venezuela.
Yo recuerdo incluso que estando yo realizando la especialización en materia constitucional, uno de mis profesores que
I recall that when I was a law student and I had a constitutional law professor, he told us, you can even win the elections, but and you will try to destroy the Constitution, but believe me, the Constitution will stop you because it's not possible. And that's exactly what happened. What they did was they tried to destroy little by little the institutions by the abandoning of the post. They tried to make fraud. They tried to call to anticipated elections. Nothing worked because Venezuela has a constitutional system that is very strong, where there is a counterbalance, where one branch of the government cannot destroy another. What they did do was they created extreme violence on the streets. And therefore, there's another mechanism that is activated to stop this violence that had been unleashed on the streets. And through these maneuvers, what they tried to do was to destroy the regimen. And so since that was impossible, they went to violence. And there is where there is a valve that is activated, that is this assembly. And when we're speaking about violence, we're speaking of guarimba. Guarimba is a word that internationally is not understood. But elsewhere we understand extreme violence.
Cualquier abogado o no, para el público en general, que en realidad nosotros tratamos de explicar estos argumentos.
And what we're trying to explain is to the general public. So what happened? Juan Guaidó arrives with the promise of not legitimatizing the current authorities. Apparently, what we have now is what is said now by the opposition is that this opposition member that is the president is not known by anybody. But let's recall, nobody knew Guaidó when he became president either. Well, this is part of the war, this soft war, because through all of these mechanisms that are foreign, that have been implemented to try to destroy the Republic of Venezuela, there is a fundamental factor that is the news media. The news media are the vanguard.
De las audiencias blancos, así se conoce en términos de guerra de cuarta generación, para poder además justificar.
What they're trying to do is they're trying to justify that when the military force has to come in, by then the people are convinced of something. There is where the news media are working.
Un diputado incluso que en las internas de la oposición perdió con otro diputado.
Let's not forget that the following congressman that was trying to reach the presidency got less votes, and that's why This is why this man obtained the presidency. Let's not forget that Guaidó is a foreign creation. He's a tool of war. And what they're trying to do is to impose the chaos, controlled chaos. And they've done it with Venezuela in different stages. So Juan Guaidó has no legitimacy because his decisions have no legitimacy. His face is his legal face is only to the outside, with the support of the U.S. media and the U.S. warfare. And when we're speaking of news media, it's not only TV or radio, it's also the internet, everything that happens on internet. Yeah, because let's not forget that the phenomenon of the internet is much widespread. Well, this communication that was bi-directional is no longer so. So now we only receive information. However, there is a new concept with internet because when we're speaking of traditional news media, you have some ethics to follow, to abide by, and all of the journalists have to abide by this. However, on internet, that doesn't apply. On internet, everything can be transmitted.
No solamente eso, se pierde porque tú tomas posición primero como sujeto, pero además porque hay el interés de que lo que.
And let's not forget that on internet, you can just use your interest and apply it onto whatever you want to present. If not, why don't we see what happens with Bolivia? In Bolivia, there were thousands of fake accounts that were created to push forward the coup of Bolivia. And additional to this, there's an order that was sent to the journalists so they could recognize the President Áñez. So this means that you recognize an order that comes from abroad. You recognize it inside through the news media. So the news media is fundamental to legitimize a person, a position, an idea, whatever. Otherwise, let's see the propaganda in Nazi times. They repeated 1,000 times a lie and until people think it's true. So this is ongoing. This is what's going on here in Venezuela. Well, not only in Venezuela, worldwide. Look what happened in Iran. Iran was a montage. It was a perfect montage. This was a very, very well planified assassination. And they spread it through the news media so the world could see the type of punishment that you might receive. So this is the theory of controlled chaos. And this strategy is applied on Venezuela. They're trying to destroy our state. And now, why do they do this? Because we are a rock in their foot. And of course, they want to dissolve us, and they want to affect the social structure. Now, they have also done this by destroying all of the currency. We have to exchange. We need currency to exchange. They did away with this logic. What for? So the social structure is destroyed, and in this environment, there is a new ideas that will be well accepted. and to make way to the liberal ideas that want to make us think that only through capitalism is it possible to advance. And in this process of convincing on behalf of these right-wing groups that are advised by the U.S., it is also necessary to keep a structure of delegitimatizing the messages of the government. To make it a bit more clear, it is not casual to find in the opposition people who say that, well, you don't have to believe the alleged economic war of the U.S. Up until when are we going to say that the U.S. is the who causes all of this? And this is widespread. Here there are two scenarios. One, an external, that has been very that has affected the revolution. And I think that internally we should also recognize some of our mistakes. We should use self-critique on this. We cannot cover the truth with a finger. But we must accept that there is a system that has been made by Washington to try to do away with our nation, and not only ours, with any nation that doesn't comply to the interests of the United States. What are we seeing now? We are seeing the struggle of two countries, one or maybe more countries, but especially two. One that is trying to go back to the glory of what they thought was the center of the world, the Sultan of the world, which is the United States of North America. That's unipolar versus different poles of power that now they don't have control of. They can't have control of everything that's going on in the world. So what is happening in this struggle? That Venezuela is right in the middle of everything because they try to retake the role of bosses, of center of the world. So what we're also seeing is that in that logic, they are trying to deregulate all of the institutions of Venezuela. They want to make this. They want to make us again a system of where we're submitted to them. Well, the thing is that they want to do away with our systems that defend our sovereignty and our peace. Of course, if that didn't exist, they could just walk in, stomp all over us. And the case of Venezuela is that we have not given in, because the president of the National Assembly and the president of the government says, well, the petroleum belongs to Venezuela. And when we analyze it, it's the same war for the resources. What the United States is, they want to take over all of the countries, not only Venezuela. They don't want to make us their allies. They want to make us their slaves. So now let's see what happens in Venezuela. In Venezuela, there is a resistance with all of the mistakes that they could have. But there is a resistance to ally themselves with this power. And Venezuela says, all of us together, there are vital spaces that we can share. This is the Bolivarianism. This is the multi-poles of the power that we're trying to find the balance. And this is a relationship of respect. You respect me, I respect you. But of course, today we have to use a dissuasion. Let's see why. Let's go to our pause and we'll be right back. The thing is that when we speak with Maria Alejandra Diaz, we can't stop her. Mr. Director, please understand. Let's go to our pause. When we're back, we'll keep on speaking with Dr. Alejandra Diaz. Let's go to our question to see if you're connected with us. After installing the new directives of the Assembly, what is the new game of the U.S. to keep on sabotaging the peace in the country? And what should the strategy be? Participate with us. After our pause, we will come back. Our guest has been speaking to us how Venezuela has tried to overcome the post-truth era. The concept of post-truth indicates that there is a change of the truth, and there's a manipulation of the information to have some influence on people. This is a manipulation of the people, so they will adopt a political position to not recognize the authority. This is the fifth generation coup d'etat. This is a strategy that has been known ever since 2019. And it comes along with the fourth generation coup d'etat, where any medium is good enough to start bombarding fake news, so the people will not recognize the legitimate president. Internet is a very fundamental piece in this, where they can call on civil disobedience, where there are continued campaigns against the president. So this is a psychological, economical, technological war. Multi-direction, as Maria Alejandra Diaz says. She's member of the National Assembly and a constitutional lawyer. She is here to help us understand the Venezuela in which we are living and the Venezuela that we are trying to project to the future. Here's a topic that we must understand. The most recent fake news comes from the strategy, a war strategy of a fourth generation, where the news media is fundamental. And what they're seeking are several things. First, the destruction of the capacity of the enemy to communicate. It's necessary to do away with the communication. What they're trying to do is to destroy the infrastructure, to destroy the chain of information. And after this happens, you destroy the perception you have about the government that you try to do away with. In this strategy, this is the control of the perception. And this happened in the War of Libya. This was the color revolution, the Arab Springs. And the effect, the CNN effect in the Libyan war was fundamental. And you knew the war because you saw it on your TV. So even the journalists in a war strategy there was a group of journalists who went along with all of the soldiers, and what they did was present the war step by step. And this is, of course, this presents one side of the war. And obviously this is projected through millions of people. And of course, the internet spreads it very, very rapidly. And what this does is it controls perception. And this is part of the fourth generation war, according to William Lean, who is the one who came up with this term. And by the way, he's American too. And of course, there are instructions developed by Chinese and the Russians. In this case, in the case of Venezuela, it has happened ever since Commander Chavez rose to power. They weren't able to do it with Chavez because Chavez was a phenomenon on the communication level. He was the most important communicator in the 21st century. That was Hugo Chavez, and he still is. We are still living of that background, of that legacy that he left us in the communication. He was able to explain everything, and he created empathy with people. Now they have to break this chain and position and make an important sector that there's a legitimate president, which is not Maduro. Now, could you please tell us your perception on something that is not so small? And it's the second self-proclamation of Juan Guaidó in a news media. Well, let's analyze the symbology of all of this. Ever since that there is a shadow government, they tried to destroy the constitution in Venezuela. Since they weren't able to do so, they are going to the violence. And since the violence was neutralized through the National Assembly, now they're going to the next phase, which is the simulation and the establishing. Because, well, let's not forget that his legitimacy is only through the news media and all of the allies of the United States and the United States themselves. Nevertheless, the worldwide system recognized the government of Nicolás Maduro. Now, within this scenario, it is very important that he continues with this legal fiction. But how does he do it? Who's going to announce all of this? Who announced that this was happening? It was his news media chief. They already had the montage on how to do it through a news channel. Because what they're trying to do is to be white during the war. And they did it through the novice mechanisms. And it was said that there was a coup d'etat in process. Can you imagine a coup d'etat that legally is against the legislative branch and the executive branch? Well, the thing is that that he could not explain to the world why he lost all of the support.
o pretende desquiciar
And what he's trying to do is to do away with the peace of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Imposición externa, foránea, y es una manifestación de esa guerra híbrida.
And this is a manifestation of this hybrid war, where the theater of all of the operations.
¿Qué esperar de esta asamblea paralela, María Alejandra?
What we expect is to keep, what we expect is that he will keep on with his speeches. Now he lost his only real space of power that he got in 2015, so now he has to continue with this farce. Let's not forget that behind all of this, there's the financing that he receives through the government of the United States. This is not just anything. Juan Guaidó is a manifestation of the civil war that they tried to impose in Venezuela through the violence. And now this is a manifestation of the civil war, of the cold civil war. Because the government, without all of the news media that makes them connect, that it's possible to go forward. Now, can you tell us why United States is so vehement in the figure of Juan Guaidó, when, of course, he has not been effective during his time in office, and there is also some doubt on him because $100,000 disappeared. Well, the United States knows that Juan Guaidó is a creation of the U.S.
El ala que ideológicamente está cooptada por los intereses de los Estados Unidos y que no va a hacer nada distinto a lo que diga, porque su estado de servilismo llega a un grado que raya en la traición a la patria. Él es la garantía.
He is the guarantee to establish a puppet government, so the United States can take over the resources of Venezuela. Let's not forget that in the case of Venezuela, what the United States wants is to take over the biggest reserve of oil in the world. This is the first gold reserve, too. And the United States doesn't want to be left behind, but they want to be the center, the sun, doing away with all of the competitors. And this is the strategy that did it. Well, if we understand that this is what happens, then we can see that this is part of the strategy. Maria Alejandra, in the couple minutes we still have, what can we expect from this new directive of the National Assembly? Let's not forget that that representative is a member of the opposition. And there was somebody who said, hey, let's pay attention. Let's not trust 100% in Parra. Well, I think that we have to think that there is good faith in everybody. But if you ask me, I think that if there is not a clear evidence that he doesn't want to, that he wants to go work forward, then we have to take them by their acts.
Apartar a los tres diputados que son los que están generando el problema, salir del desacato, reconociendo al resto de las instituciones. Tú le preguntas a ese diputado, ¿usted reconoce al presidente Nicolás Maduro? Y evade la respuesta.
So I think it's important to ask them, first of all, if they recognize President Maduro as the president. If they recognize him as a president, then we can move forward. Otherwise, then he's just part of the other group. Let's not forget that the United States will send them a lot of money, and that will make them change their mind. So I think that it's necessary to see who is who. Let's not forget that it's that we're not fighting against this opposition. We're fighting against the most genocide government in history. This is not just anything. This is a hybrid war, and in the midst of this hybrid war, there has to be a position. They have to take positions. Thank you very much, María Alejandra, for your time, for Jugada Crítica.